Your heart is too weak for any stress. Dr. Brennan's voice echoed in my ears as I sat in the examination room, my chest tight. I'd come in for my routine checkup. I was 58 years old and had been managing my mild arrhythmia for 3 years with medication and lifestyle adjustments. My condition was stable, manageable. I'd been told repeatedly I could live a normal life with proper care, but something felt wrong about what he was saying now. I'm recommending you avoid all stressful situations, Dr. Brennan continued, his eyes fixed on his computer screen rather than on me. Any emotional upset could trigger a cardiac event. Your family needs to understand this. You should consider limiting your involvement in family decisions. Let them handle things. The words landed strangely. Why would my cardiologist be giving me advice about family involvement? That wasn't medical guidance. That was something else entirely. I left his office that afternoon with a printed document outlining his recommendations. I read it 3 times in my car, trying to understand the shift in his tone. 6 months ago, he'd told me I was doing remarkably well. He'd encouraged me to stay active, to travel, to live fully. Now he was suggesting I retreat from life entirely. When I got home, I called my daughter-in-law, Willayella. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the concern in her voice immediately. Avara, how did it go? What did Dr. Brennan say? I told her what he'd said. I read her the recommendations verbatim. There was a pause. Then Willayella said something that made my blood run cold. Oh, thank God. We were so worried. We actually spoke with him last week about your condition. We needed him to understand how serious this is. My stomach dropped. You spoke with my cardiologist? Without me? Of course we did, Willayella said, and her voice had shifted. It was smoother now, almost satisfied. Your son Timaeus was terrified you were going to have another episode. We all were. We needed professional guidance on how to help you manage your stress. I couldn't speak for a moment. Timaeus was my youngest, 34 years old, and he'd never expressed any particular concern about my health. He was busy with his own life, his own marriage to Willayella, his own career as an investment banker. We had a good relationship, but not one where he'd typically orchestrate medical interventions without telling me. I need to talk to Timaeus, I said. He's at work right now, Willayella replied quickly. But I can tell you exactly what we discussed. Dr. Brennan agreed that you need to step back from making any major decisions. We're going to help you manage things from now on. The phone felt heavy in my hand. What things? Your finances, for one, Willayella said. Your medical care, obviously, and we think you should consider transferring your business interests to Timaeus. The stress of running that company is exactly what could kill you, Avara. We're trying to save your life. I had a small consulting firm. I'd built it over 20 years. It was my identity, my purpose, my independence. The idea of handing it over to Timaeus, who had never shown interest in it, made something inside me rebel. I'm not transferring my business, I said carefully. That's the stress talking, Willayella replied, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. Dr. Brennan specifically said you need to avoid making emotional decisions. We'll discuss this when you're calmer. Timaeus will call you tonight. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen for an hour, staring at the doctor's letter. Something was profoundly wrong with this picture. I'd been managing my condition well. I was taking my medication. I exercised regularly. I ate well. I wasn't under unusual stress. So why had my cardiologist suddenly become convinced that I was on the verge of a cardiac catastrophe? And more importantly, why had my family been speaking to him without my knowledge? That evening, Timaeus called. His voice was gentle, almost pitying. Mom, we're really concerned about you. he said. Dr. Brennan explained that your heart is much more fragile than you realize. He said you need to reduce all stress immediately. That means stepping back from work, from making decisions, from anything that could trigger an episode. Tamias, I'm fine, I said, hearing the frustration in my own voice. My condition is stable. I've been stable for years. That's what you think, Tamias said, and there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. But Dr. Brennan says you're in denial about how serious this is. He says people with your condition often don't realize how close they are to a major event until it's too late. Did Dr. Brennan tell you that, or did Willaella tell you that? I asked. There was a pause. What do you mean? I mean, did you speak to Dr. Brennan directly, or did Willaella tell you what he said? Another pause, longer this time. Willaella has been very involved in your care, Tamias said carefully. She's been researching your condition, talking to doctors, trying to understand what you need. She cares about you, Mom. We all do. I believe you care about me, I said. But I don't believe you've actually spoken to Dr. Brennan, and I don't believe he said half of what Willaella is claiming he said. Mom, you're getting upset, Tamias said, and his voice shifted to something almost clinical. This is exactly the kind of stress Dr. Brennan warned about. You need to calm down. You need to let us help you. I hung up the phone. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. Something was happening here, something calculated and careful. Willaella had always been ambitious. I'd noticed that about her from the beginning of her relationship with Tamias. She'd encouraged him to take increasingly high-risk investment positions. She'd pushed him to spend more time at work. She'd subtly positioned herself as the decision-maker in their household. But this was different. This was orchestrated. This was using my health as a weapon. I pulled up Dr. Brennan's office number and called the next morning. His receptionist told me he was with a patient, but she could take a message. I asked her to tell him I needed to discuss the recommendations he'd given me. I emphasized that I wanted to verify them directly with him before making any major life changes based on his advice. 20 minutes later, his nurse called back. Dr. Brennan says he's happy to review your care plan with you at your next appointment. He also wants to know if you're experiencing any new cardiac symptoms. No mention of the conversation with my family. No acknowledgement that they'd been in contact. I scheduled an appointment for 3 days later. In those 3 days, I noticed everything changing. Tamias called twice, both times sounding increasingly strained. He mentioned that Willaella was worried about me. He suggested I should consider moving in with them so they could monitor my health more closely. He said they'd already prepared a room for me. My other children, Eileen and Gavin, also reached out. But their calls felt different. They seemed uncertain, almost confused about why they were calling. When I asked them directly if Willaella had suggested they contact me, there was a long silence before Eileen admitted that yes, Willaella had mentioned they should check on me because I was being difficult about accepting help. I realized then what was happening. Willaella was isolating me. She was turning my family into her instruments, whether they fully understood it or not. She was using my health as justification for dismantling my independence piece by piece. The day of my appointment with Dr. Brennan, I brought my phone. I'd recorded my conversation with Willaella. I'd written down the timeline of events. I'd documented every call, every suggestion, every escalation. Dr. Brennan looked uncomfortable when I walked into his office. Dr. Brennan, I need to ask you something directly, I said before he could begin his usual pleasantries. Did you have a conversation with my family about my cardiac condition? He shifted in his chair. Your son and daughter-in-law expressed concerns about your well-being. It's not unusual for family members to want to understand a patient's condition. Did you tell them that I was refusing treatment? I asked. No, he said, and his voice was careful. I would never characterize your care that way. You've been compliant with your medication and recommendations. Did you tell them that I needed to avoid stress and step back from my business? He hesitated. I may have mentioned that stress management is important for patients with arrhythmia. That's not what I asked, I said. Did you tell them specifically that I should transfer my business to my son? Dr. Brennan's face flushed. Of course not. That's not medical advice. That's a personal financial decision. I played the recording of Willaella's voice. Dr. Brennan specifically said you need to step back from making any major decisions. We think you should consider transferring your business interests to Timaeus. Dr. Brennan listened, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable. That's not accurate, he said quietly. I would never recommend something like that. Then we have a problem, I said. Because my family is telling me that you said things you didn't say. They're using your name and your authority to convince me to hand over control of my life, and I need to know if you're aware that's happening or if they've misrepresented your words without your knowledge. Dr. Brennan stood up and walked to his window. He was quiet for a long moment. I think we need to have a different kind of conversation, he finally said. Let me examine you first. He did a full cardiac workup. EKG, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels, everything came back normal. Better than normal, actually. My medication was working perfectly. My heart rhythm was steady. My overall cardiac health was excellent for my age. Your heart is strong, Dr. Brennan said when he finished. I want to be very clear about that. You're not in danger. Your condition is well managed. You should be living your life normally. Working, traveling, being active, all of that is fine. More than fine. It's healthy for you. Then why did you give me those recommendations? I asked. Dr. Brennan sat down heavily. Your daughter-in-law came to see me. She said she was concerned about your mental state. She said you were making poor decisions, that you were under stress, that you needed guidance. She asked me to recommend that you step back from work and let your family handle your affairs. And you agreed to that? I didn't agree to lie, Dr. Brennan said, and there was real conflict in his voice. But I also didn't think carefully about what I was being asked to do. She was very persuasive. She had medical research printed out. She talked about your condition in very specific technical terms. She seemed knowledgeable, and she seemed genuinely concerned. She was manipulating you, I said flatly. Yes, Dr. Brennan agreed. I see that now. I should have insisted on speaking with you first. I should have been more careful about the boundary between medical advice and personal recommendations. I'm sorry, Ms. Lee. I made a mistake. I left his office with a written statement from Dr. Brennan clarifying that my cardiac condition was stable, that I was not in danger from normal stress, that I should continue my current lifestyle and work, and that my family had misrepresented his medical opinions. He also documented that he had never recommended I transfer any assets or step back from decision-making. I had that statement in my hands when I walked into my son's office the next day. Timaeus looked shocked to see me. His office was on the 42nd floor of a downtown building, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. He stood up from behind his desk, his expression shifting from surprise to something that looked almost like guilt. Mom, what are you doing here? You should be resting. The stress is manufactured, I interrupted, by Willaella, and you've been helping her, whether you fully understand what you're doing or not. I placed Dr. Brennan's statement on his desk. Timaeus read it. His face went pale. I don't understand, he said, but his voice was small. Willaella said, I know what Willaella said, I told him. She told you I was in denial about my health. She told you I was making poor decisions. She told you I needed to be protected from myself. And she used Dr. Brennan's authority to make it sound legitimate. But she was so concerned, Tomias said, and he sounded almost lost. She spent hours researching your condition. She talked to doctors. She seemed like she was really trying to help. She was trying to control me, I said. She was trying to isolate me from my independence. She was trying to get me to hand over my business and my finances to you. And she used me, used my health, as the tool to do it. Tomias sat down slowly. I didn't know. I swear, Mom, I didn't know what she was doing. Then you need to decide right now, I said, whether you're going to continue letting her manipulate both of us, or whether you're going to start thinking for yourself. The conversation that followed was long and difficult. Tomias called Williella into his office. When she arrived and saw me there, her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, calculation, and finally a kind of cold resignation. You went to the doctor, she said to me. It wasn't a question. I did, I confirmed. And I got the truth. Williella's jaw tightened. Dr. Brennan is a coward. He doesn't have the spine to stand by his own recommendations. He didn't make those recommendations, I said. You made them, and you put his name behind them. That's fraud, Williella. That's elder abuse. I was trying to help you, Williella said, and her voice was sharp with frustration. You're being stubborn and self-destructive. You work too hard. You stress yourself out. You're going to have a heart attack, and then what? Then Tomias will be left alone, grieving, without his mother. I was trying to prevent that. No, I said quietly. You were trying to control me. And when I wouldn't be controlled through persuasion, you decided to use fear. You decided to use my health as a weapon. Tomias looked between us, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something that looked like shame. Mom's right, he said to Williella. What you did, that wasn't okay. Williella's face hardened. So you're choosing her over me? Over your wife? I'm choosing the truth, Tomias said. And I'm choosing to stop letting you manipulate me? What happened next was the dissolution of a carefully constructed lie. Williella left Tomias's office in fury. Within a week, Tomias had hired a lawyer. Within 2 weeks, he'd filed for divorce. Within a month, he'd moved out of the house they'd shared and into an apartment across town. My other children reached out to me with apologies and questions. Eileen felt guilty for calling me at Williella's request. Gavor admitted that Williella had been encouraging him to pressure me as well. They were all, in their own ways, coming to terms with the fact that someone they'd trusted had been using them as pawns. But the real reckoning came when I realized how close I'd come to surrendering everything. If I'd believed the lie, if I'd accepted the false medical authority, if I'd decided that Williella was right and that I needed to step back, to rest, to let others make my decisions. If I'd transferred my business to Tomias, if I'd handed over control of my finances, if I'd moved into their house and become dependent on them, I would have lost myself entirely. The months that followed were complicated. Tomias went through a painful divorce. He had to confront the ways he'd been manipulated, the ways he'd allowed himself to be used as a tool in Williella's scheme. He had to rebuild his relationship with me from a place of genuine connection, rather than obligation or fear. I returned to my cardiologist for regular checkups. Dr. Brennan was more careful now, more thoughtful about the boundaries between medical advice and personal recommendation. He never allowed another family member into a consultation without my explicit permission. I threw myself back into my work. I traveled. I made decisions. I lived. And every time I felt a flutter in my chest, every time my heart did something unexpected, I didn't panic. I didn't interpret it as a sign that I was fragile or broken or in danger. I understood it for what it was, a minor irregularity that I was managing well, a condition that didn't define me or limit me or give anyone the right to control me. 6 months after Willayella's scheme unraveled, I sat in my office on a Tuesday afternoon and realized something profound. The lie that nearly killed me wasn't about my health. It was about my willingness to believe that I was helpless. It was about the seductive power of having someone else take responsibility for my life. It was about how fear can make us surrender our power to people who claim to be protecting us. Willayella had been counting on that. She'd been counting on me being afraid enough, tired enough, uncertain enough to let go. But I wasn't. Today, 3 years later, I'm 58 years old with a stable cardiac condition that I manage well. I work full-time, I travel, I make my own decisions. Tamias is remarried to someone who respects his autonomy and mine. My relationship with my children is stronger because it's built on honesty rather than manipulation. And I never, ever let fear convince me that I'm helpless again. If someone in your life is using your health, your age, or your fears to control you, recognize it for what it is. Not care, but control. Trust your own instincts. Verify what you're being told. Don't surrender your power to anyone, no matter how much they claim to be helping you.